Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece episodes 467 through 469. Nice. Even if it means death, Luffy versus the Navy, the battle starts. Hard battles, one after another, Devil Fruit Eaters versus Devil Fruit Eaters. And Kuma's transformation, Eva's blow of anger. In these episodes, we have got a lot of people sort of finally deciding whose side they're on, and a long sequence of a marriage between Boa Hancock and Luffy. Truly, you guys, so puzzling. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian for commissioning this episode. Y'all, this is a real weird one in its ways. There are spots where it just feels very One Piece, and then there are places where I was like, what is this? What is happening here? So I'm just going to start off at the beginning. These are... And this tends to be the case when you guys have booked like 3 episodes in a row for one recording. Those episodes usually are very overlapping to the point where, like, you know, I usually jump ahead so that I can skip the credits because it's often got spoilers in it. And I usually try to get to the spot, ideally, where you have like the title card, even though I don't want to try and read them. The title card is the signal, okay, we have finished with like the previously ons, and now we're getting into like the meat of the new episode. But in these, a lot of the time, even after the title card, we're getting full repeats of scenes in the previous episode. And I was really surprised, like the third episode out of these 3, it was so much just like going back over scenes that had just happened. But, you know, like I find it frustrating when I'm watching it one after the other, but I have to imagine that when these were airing like once a week, you needed that kind of reminder. So, all right, let's start off with Even If It Means Death. Because this is when, you know, we had all of our Luffy and his friends sailing through the sky with the amazing narration of, like, you may wonder why Luffy and his friends are sailing in the sky in the last episode. And I really enjoy that the arrival here and the way that Sengoku is, like, it turns out trying to fake them out when he said that he was moving up Ace's execution. I keep wanting to say Ace's assassination, and I think it's just like the alliteration that's sort of appealing to me, and my brain just wants that to be what it is. But I really liked the fact that he had been trying to trick them, because you guys, it didn't even occur to me. It's one of the things about this show, and it sort of winds up working in its favor, but there is a sort of inconsistency in tone sometimes, where the show will make people much more foolish than you think they should be, all things considered. And then sometimes you'll get in a groove of being like, well, kind of like a lot of people in this are fools. And then all of a sudden they'll bust out with like, except this guy. And it catches you off guard in a way that feels at times like, all right, well, that's not really fair. But also, I like being surprised. So I guess I don't mind underestimating most characters, as long as I get to have these little moments of like, oh, you thought you knew what was going on, you know? Florian says, yeah, this section is really padded out, but is also a lot going on, lots of small pieces moving. Yeah, and I think that's going to be like my main challenge in talking about these, because we jump around from fight to fight in a way that's like really, it's easy to forget like a particular character and mentioning what's going on with them. So it's apologies if there's any like section or interaction that folks listening are like, I can't believe that she didn't mention XYZ. I'm really doing my best. I have the episode like up in another tab that I look at to remind me of things. But sometimes it's just hard to get to everything or, know what's important and what's not. That's another part, because some things can turn out to be really crucial later on that you just didn't pay much attention to immediately. So this is, we had the thing with Crocodile attempting to take down Whitebeard and Luffy stepping in. It's really funny because he's like in midair and Whitebeard, I don't know if he knew that Luffy was going to save him or if he just assumed somebody had his back and he just wasn't sure who. Whatever the case, Whitebeard doesn't move a muscle. He's just like, you never learn, do you? And for his part, Luffy's just, this dude has brought his entire army here to save Ace. So he's on my side, and yeah, I'm not going to let you hurt him. Like, what do you think I'm going to do? It's, I said last time, like, Crocodile, what was your bigger plan here? You have to know that this is not going to work out. But Luffy's position on this and him being like, I get you want to save your brother, so go ahead and do that and stay out of my way. I'm like, you're threatening to kill the other primary ally in the saving Ace equation before Ace is saved. Why would he get out of your way? This is like key. This is a crucial player in the game. Just wait a second, Crocodile. Hold your horses until after the rescue and then just do some shit, whatever, But yeah, he's just not really thinking too clearly here. I love too Marco watching and saying, I guess it runs in the family. There comes a point a little bit later where Whitebeard is telling Marco like not to let anything happen to Luffy, and he's just like, aye aye. But in the immediate moment, he's just telling Luffy, you're fucking everything up. What are you even doing here? And it's really funny, you guys, because they show Luffy standing next to him. And Whitebeard is, it looks like about 15 feet tall. He is so huge. And I think that, like, overall, this is the part of the show that I find the most confusing. And I know that that's something that's like, just a wild statement in general, because One Piece is bonkers. So anything being confusing, like, how do you quantify which one is the most? But for me, it definitely is like the relative size of all of these different beings. We have actual giants, but then we have people who are just like way taller than other people. And then we have like the supersized Ors type giants. It is really tough for me to like understand. And I don't know if we get an explanation of this, but it seems like at this point, anybody who's like a warlord has an actual bigger body. And I'm like, does this happen because they become warlords? Is this like a change in their body because of the sheer amount of power that they contain and control, that their body has to grow in order to contain it, because otherwise it sort of just seems like too much of a coincidence that all the warlords are so huge. So I don't know, but she's not particularly big, is she? And of course, she's always going to be the exception to anything because she's a woman. And there only can be one woman in any given grouping. So whatever is going on with her is not going to be representative of like the average. But I was just trying to remember, and I think that she's kind of like an average size woman. She's like tall, but not abnormally tall. So the whole like vibe from Whitebeard, he's really delighted with Luffy and the fact that he's like coming out here and just declaring for himself. And I love when he says, "Don't come crying to me." And Luffy's like, "Well, I'm not old like you are, so don't worry about me." And this is when we get on into the new stuff. Because Luffy decides that he's going to be the one who rescues Ace. And by the end of these 3 episodes, he is the one closest to Ace physically. Like, he has nearly reached him. But, we jump over briefly, and I think this is the only time we see these two in these 3 episodes, to Kobe and Helmeppo. And, Helmeppo is like, "What the hell is Luffy doing? Why would you bust out of a prison and then come straight to Navy HQ? How stupid can you be? I'd be hiding under my bed right now if I were him." And Kobe is like, "He's not stupid. He's Luffy. This is the only way he knows." And I thought that was sort of a weird way to say it. I get what he means, but and it is sort of funny too that Helmeppo is, well, why didn't he just run away and hide? Because he's not a piece of shit pussy like you are, Helmeppo, no offense. Somebody that he loves is about to get fucking executed, and he's going to do something about it. And I know that's probably difficult for you to wrap your weird blonde head around, but I'm sorry if the people close to you would have just been executed without you lifting a finger. I will freely admit, likely would also be the case in my situation. If somebody I love were about to get executed, I don't feel like I would probably wage war about it, because I'm just not that type. But Helmeppo, just being like, "Oh, he's so stupid." Is he stupid? Or are you just completely missing the point, bud? I think it's that second one. So there's a kind of multi-episode through line with Ace when we're in his POV, so to speak, because and it's a really the way that this goes. I was glad it didn't go on for too long, because what it is pretty much Ace just wanting everybody to stop risking their lives and feeling really frustrated that they're not listening to him, that they don't understand he isn't worth dying for. And he's at one point yelling out at Luffy, trying to piss him off, basically, and tell him, you only became a pirate because you wanted to copy me, and what are you even doing here? And, it's very transparent. Luffy himself, not that I think, even if Ace really meant all of what he was saying, I don't think it would matter to Luffy in the slightest, because he's just a very one-track kind of mind. But it was the sort of thing that, we know why you're yelling this, bud, and you may as well save your breath. I understand that you feel the need to make an effort to save your friend, your brother, from hurting himself and putting himself in harm's way, but it's too late for that now. He is in it. He can't turn around and just leave. They'll fucking crush him. So he is either going to save you, and this is, he's going to succeed and get all the way to you, or he is going to die in the attempt, and those are the only 2 options anymore. And eventually, Ace does reach a point where he's like, "I've decided I'm going to accept any help that I'm able to get." And I was just glad, because I thought it was going to be a lot longer, a situation of I'm not worth it. I can't take this sacrifice. It's too much. And I was just really glad I didn't have to sit through too much of it, because it's the sort of thing where, as much as that is a pretty human reaction, and if I had friends who were putting their lives on the line to save me, I probably would also be like, "I love you so much, please don't." It's not fun to watch. You know what I'm saying? And, sorry, David says, Helmeppo kind of has a normal person reaction. Kobe has a reaction of someone who admires and wants to imitate greatness but isn't there yet. Yeah, I would agree with that. He's definitely... There's another series that I'm covering, and there's a sort of heroic person, and it's really interesting because Kobe is like the flip side. This heroic person has one particular follower who is not exactly their friend. It's somebody who admires him deeply, and more than he is loyal, he wants to be like this other person. And so, in a sense, is actually threatened by him quite a lot, despite the fact that he's on his side. And so it leads him to sort of doing some shady shit occasionally, because he is attempting to gain the kind of like notoriety that the man he admires has gained, but he's going about it in the wrong way. So it's sort of interesting because Kobe is like the inverse of that. What if you were like a good person who had like a sort of hero worship thing going on with a person that you deeply like respected, and not, you want to be them, but like representing something very different. That's what's sort of fascinating to me about Kobe, is how he is in the Marines. He doesn't seem like he wants out of that situation. So I believe that this is going to be his career trajectory forever. And yet a pirate is one of the people that he just like admires the most. And I actually kind of like that. The concept of being able to see the like value of what a person is in their heart, despite what their label is, so to speak. And understanding that there's ways that you can implement the same characteristics they themselves have, of like tenacity and loyalty, but you can use those in a different direction to support a totally different system than what they're doing. I really like that idea, and I think it's the sort of thing that a lot of us tend to apply, and it can be very easy, if somebody isn't on your side, to simply see them as an enemy. And granted, Kobe and Luffy met before Luffy was officially a pirate, before Kobe was in the Marines, so they had a chance to establish a relationship and a friendship before those labels were in place, so that probably helps. But I just like the fact that Kobe didn't go, oh, okay, now you're a pirate, so now we're just enemies, end of story. He just is trying to sort of like thread that needle and be like, he's still my bud, and I still think that he is rad as hell. No, I'm not on his side, and I'm technically supposed to like be rooting for him to fail, but also I can't like not admit he's a complete badass. Look at him out here, you know? Especially when other people around him just think he's mad because they are so not getting what it is that he is like attempting to do, or what his life is and what's important. David says, what rank will Kobe end up as in Helmeppo? Compare power levels to ranks we've seen. Oh God, I can't even begin to guess, David. There's a combo of reasons why. One, ranks, I completely lose track. If you want to list them with like, you know, least to most to help me out, I could attempt a guess, but I'm not even real confident about that. And then there's also like, you know, they've been being trained by Garp, and so they're going to become better fighters. But really, it seems like if you want to like get somewhere, you've got to have a fucking devil fruit power, and or be able to harness Haka. And it doesn't seem like either of them are on their way there. And I don't know if it's ever been mentioned, like, if they can get their hands on devil fruit, if they would want them. Helmeppo strikes me as the type that would definitely want to eat one, because he is just sort of a bully. I don't know how much of that he's grown out of, but that personality type is somebody who's going to take whatever extra power they can get, right? I feel like Kobe would be somebody who would eventually, you could coax them to have the devil fruit, but it would not be his like immediate instinct to go after it, because he probably would, he has enough like caution and anxiety to him that I think he would have the same approach that I do of just sort of like, yeah, but you don't know what's going to happen. You don't even know what this fruit's going to do, you know? So David is saying Commander Smoker, Captain, Admiral Kizaru. Well, there's vice admirals, right? And isn't there like below, what level are they at currently? They're just like cadet. They're not cadets anymore. It's been too long, right? I genuinely do not know. It's hard for me to like imagine exactly how much time passes in this show as well. You know, we've got another 500 episodes at least to get through. So I don't know how much we see them grow up, like how much what they get up to, you know? Florian is saying, look at the spreadsheet. Oh, right. Hold on. Let me open that in the old Discord because Florian, sent it to me again and I was on my phone when I got it. So I didn't get a chance to save it, but I'm going to go and grab that. Okay. So Vice Admiral, Captain, Lieutenant, Admiral. We've got a bunch of names here. Thank you so much, by the way. I'm going to put the link to this. Well, I was going to put it in the chat, but I'm not sure you'll be able to reach it because it was only available to me once Florian gave me permission to see it. So it may not be something that everybody can access. But Florian made this spreadsheet with the people's like picture, their name, the position that they hold in whether it's the Marines or, you know, whatever like clan or island they live on, and then powers. And the one on top is GARP, and it says for powers undefined, which I appreciate that because I was thinking the other day, like, do we know what GARP can do? I don't feel like we do. So that helps me to know for sure. Like, we've seen like very little of him in terms of fighting. Florian says everyone can reach it now. Okay, dope. So I'm going to post it in the chat here. And that way, if David wants to take a look at it, he can see. But, you know, if I'm thinking what, like, if I'm going to go with the trope, my assumption would be eventually Kobe reaches Admiral and Helmeppo gets stuck at like Vice Admiral. Like he doesn't quite get as far. Kobe reaches one of the top positions and Helmeppo is sort of like his right hand, but isn't pure of heart enough to get as far as Kobe does. And that's just pure trope. So I don't even want to say that's a real guess, you know? But anyway, so I want to talk about the conversation. Like Luffy tells Whitebeard about how they're going to be moving up Ace's execution. And at first, Whitebeard is upset by this. And then later on, he's like, you know, this just doesn't really have the ring of truth to it. Like, Kizaru is a lot of things, or not Kizaru. Oh my god. You guys, help me. Sengoku. But he's not stupid, and he had to know if he's like putting this out over all of the like snail transponders that somebody was going to hear it. So it just feels like this is a fucking setup. And I love how at the beginning of the episode, Sengoku's like, oh, okay, so Luffy shows up and all of a sudden everybody's acting like they're a totally different army. And he's like a little agitated. And then he immediately sort of calms down and is like, it's fine. Our approach is completely like impossible to beat. And really is telling himself, I have nothing to worry about. But then later, when it's apparent that Whitebeard has figured out what the ploy was, Then Sengoku's like, all right, well, that was pretty obvious, I guess. Like, he immediately sort of goes, yeah, I know. Like, I probably should have made it a little less obvious what was happening. Oh, well. So it felt like a lot of bravado. Like, Sengoku doesn't have the confidence that he is projecting, actually. And I find that sort of interesting in terms of like a character thing. How much of it is fake it till you make it, and how much of it is genuine confidence with, like, I don't want to say a lack of self-awareness exactly, but more like underestimating your enemy. And I feel like that knowledge that Sengoku had been trying to set them up when I hadn't expected that kind of trick has made me a little bit more leery of him as a character, and made me realize that, like, he's a bit smarter than what we tend to deal with, you know? We haven't had a lot of real capable baddies lately. We have had baddies with powers that are scary. We have had baddies with, like, backup and circumstances that make them feel like, how can you beat them? But I really think, as of right now, Crocodile remains like the most competent of all the bad guys, and the one that I still kind of look at as like, this is a dude who we should be worried about. Not just in terms of where he is at any given moment, but just the fact that he has the mind to work out, like, exactly how to play people in a way that can be utilized no matter where he is. And anybody who is that adaptable is a threat. That's going to be something that's, like, difficult to beat. Moria he has this power, but, like, as Jinbei points out completely correctly, because we've actually seen this exact thing before, Moria's too fucking greedy for this, like, shadow power, and he overdoes it, and then he screws himself. So as much as he has a really dope power, he doesn't utilize it well because he doesn't have good judgment. And we've got Magellan, who has this, like, really crazy poison power, but he is isolated to, like, this one goal of keeping the jail under control, and there's a real limited sense to him. Like, I found him frightening, but I didn't find him super competent. He depended on the wrong people a lot, and that's like a bad judgment call. I feel like Crocodile was the one who, when you actually met him and dealt with him directly, he was personally competent. And even though they fought their way through the Baroque Works people, a lot of them were also pretty badass. And so, despite the fact that they ultimately failed, I could see why Crocodile trusted them. Whereas Magellan trusting What's-His-Face, who kept wanting to replace him, and keeping him in that position, it just felt a little weird to me that, like, this dude was constantly trying to undermine you and making it very clear that he was, like, low-key sabotaging you because he wanted your job. And there's just not really it feels like poor judgment for him. So while he has his own very effective personal power, he didn't seem like he had a lot going on beyond that to me. David says, Sengoku being the guy who faked it to the top, who has the Buddha fruit, is fascinating. The Buddha fruit. Have we seen that? Like, what's going on with him? I don't even remember, because we go through so many new powers and see so many things that I've sort of lost track of who has done what. Florian says, yeah, Croc is a smart devil. David says, if Crocodile had Moria or Enel's fruit, he would be absolutely devastating because he would use them so much more effectively. That's a really good, like, shorter, quicker way to say what I was trying to say. Like, Crocodile's power is very frightening, but it's more frightening because of how creative he's gotten with it and how, like, the use he puts it to. There are other abilities that are way more terrifying. And yet those people don't seem to really have, like, the focus or imagination that Crocodile has. And I gotta be real, I'm really, like, a little disappointed at the fact that Crocodile goes after Whitebeard the way that he does, because he has seemed to be so intelligent and to think things through in a big picture sort of way, that the fact he is handling this the way that he is, it's almost suspect, because it's so poorly thought out that I'm like, dude, are you actually trying to hurt Whitebeard, or is this part of some other scheme going on? Because it just seems like you aren't the type to make this particular type of mistake, I wouldn't think. But, you know, what do I know? Sorry guys, I'm like getting so congested as I'm recording, and I don't know if you can like hear my voice changing because my nose is getting stuffed up, but I was doing great, and now all of a sudden I'm just like bleh, bleh, all clogged up. So we see Luffy like fighting through a bunch of other Marines, and at one point he's really like, I won't say he's getting his ass kicked exactly because he's holding his own, but the dudes that he's going up against are a lot tougher than he was expecting. He thought he was going to be able to tear through them like they were peons, and it turns out they actually are quite strong. And at one point Luffy is just like, Jesus Christ, this is really a little bit more than I was prepared for. And finally, we have Moria raising some zombie soldiers. Now, I'm curious about this because the zombie soldiers come up out of the ground, and Moria decides that he's going to take the shadows from some other Marines and put them into these bodies. So here's my question. David says he went after Whitebeard because he's a warlord. I understand the why. In just why he would go after him. I don't understand doing it now. The way that he does it. It just feels like the timing is as bad as it could be to do this. And it just felt very foolish. That's all. But this thing with Moria, did he bring these bodies with him? Right, he did, right? It's not like these are soldiers that have fallen and he's like resurrecting them, because the zombies, once they stand up, they all have their like body parts stitched together in a way that looks like, okay, they were definitely on the like table in the lab. And I can't help but like wonder, what do the Marines make of the fact that somebody who's allegedly on their side has like basically stolen the souls of their soldiers to create his like undead army? Because he flat out says, you guys fight for me now. Like, he is taking ownership of these Marines in a way that feels very, I'm going to use you the way that I see fit. Fuck the Marines. It's not about the Marines anymore. And this is the sort of thing that I know is the crux of why the Marines teaming up with these Warlords of the Sea is like a questionable enterprise. Because the Warlords of the Sea are as loyal as they're gonna be, but they don't really, they're not rulable. Does that make sense? Like, they have their agenda, and they'll play nice as long as it's in their own interest to play nice and do what the Marines want. But in the end, it seems like mostly they're more powerful than the Marines can handle. And so they can sort of just do whatever they want a lot of the time. And it's the sort of thing where probably, if you're Sengoku watching this happen, for instance, you're just telling yourself, all right, well, I don't like this, but right now we're in the midst of this big fight, so I'm going to let Moria do what he do, and then we'll cope with like whatever the fucking fallout about this is a little bit later on. Once the battle is over, I will come and like be like, give me my men's fucking souls back, their shadows. And maybe that's the case, but I don't know how you like enforce that. How do you just make him do the thing? Because it really feels like he's got quite the advantage at this point. Now, what we find out though, and this, I don't remember, this isn't something that anybody discovered while they were actually on Thriller Bark, right? Is that because these zombies were raised using devil fruit powers, they are as weak to the ocean because of that whole, you know, can't swim sea stone or whatever it's called type thing. So all Jinbei has to do is just like get a wave of seawater to crash over them and they fucking drop. I kind of love this. I think it's really interesting, the fact that Oda has made the ocean, what's the word I want? I guess the Achilles heel of being a devil fruit eater, because he couldn't have picked a more ubiquitous substance. This is a show about pirates and marines. They're literally always taking place on beaches, ships, like the ocean is always there. So Oda was like, all right, I'm going to give these people these bonkers fucking powers, and I am also going to make it, in a way, extremely easy to fuck them up if you know how. But also, those people are aware of their own, like, their own weakness enough of the time that they're able to keep themselves from falling into those sorts of traps. This, though, with Jinbei and him being like, okay, here's a wave, now you're done, I really got the feeling that Moria wasn't even aware that this would work. I don't know if he has ever tried to like use these zombies out in the world in this fashion, and maybe he did know and he didn't think that anybody else had like figured it out. But it just seems to me that he was quite shocked when all of his zombies drop, because Jinbei is so casual about it. And when he says to Luffy, like, because Luffy's watching and sort of like, what the hell just happened? And Jinbei's like, oh yeah, well, you know, seawater. David says, I think the sea darkens the sun. The water rehydrated Luffy and Alabasta, so water isn't bad in itself. The sea darkens the sun. I think I'm not following you, David. Florian says, I think there's a difference between seawater and normal water in this world. Oh, yeah, like the seawater, it's definitely with the devil fruit eaters, the seawater is it has like whatever substance in it that they use to make the what is it, sea prism stone, to stop them from being able to use their powers. It seems like it's just sort of dissolved into the water unless you somehow manage to find a concentrate of it. So it's not water in general. It seems just like seawater, but I think the sea darkens the sun. David says the salt in the seawater wrecks zombies. That's not what he says. Jinbei specifically says to Luffy, they were made with devil fruit powers, so they are weak to the sea, is the way he phrases it. He never mentions anything about the salt. I don't know if that's like another thing that comes up later that gets specified, but that's not what it's presented like here. But anyway, I just think that's a really fascinating way to approach this. And fucking Moria watching this like thing, all of his dudes go forward and just standing there. And then we go over to I'm going to go look for his name real quick, but Kizaru, that is Kizaru. He is the one, I think, Florian, you told me that he was animated to look like a popular like action movie star. He is so sort of fascinating to me as a character. Like, it's the design of him, for sure, looking so much more like a real person that I initially find fascinating. Also, he has this voice that almost sounds like a blaxploitation movie character. There's something about I'm trying to think of the way to describe the tone of his voice, because I want to say cartoonish, but like, this is a cartoon, so that feels very pointless and redundant to say. But he just has this sort of tone that's almost like playful, I guess is the word I want. And I just really enjoy anytime he's on screen, even though he is an enemy and doing things I don't like. He's just very entertaining, and I enjoy him every time he's on. So, okay. David says, back in Thriller Bark, we learn that the zombies are weak to salt. Ah, that's what you guys are talking about. Okay, now I remember the salt thing. I had forgotten about that. But yeah, I think Florian says seawater, not salt, so I think you can take it either way. I think it's like, he says because they were brought around by devil fruit, they're weak to the sea. He specifically says like the devil fruit connection. So I definitely think it's the ocean being the antithesis, or whatever you want to call it, to devil fruit powers. However, if they had told me that it was the salt, that also would have worked for me. Like, I think they're very clear about exactly what's working here, but they could have just left it as the salt thing. And the fact that they didn't, and it's mentioned that it's the devil fruit connection that makes them weak to it, means that this is something that could potentially be an issue. Like, I was sort of thinking, for example, when Magellan poisons Luffy, Luffy's a bad choice because he has devil fruit powers. So if you put Luffy in seawater, he also loses his own abilities. But if you were like a regular person that got poisoned by Magellan's powers, and you got sunk into a bath of seawater, would that mitigate the effects of the poison because the poison came from a devil fruit power? Or would it be like too late because it's already in your system and there's just kind of nothing to be done? You know what I'm saying? It just felt like this opened a lot of doors for other potential stuff, which won't necessarily be something that the show pursues a lot, but I just thought it was an interesting question. So, okay, I'm just taking forever, you guys. I'm so sorry. But like I said, there's just so many different things going on in this section. So we have then the moment where everybody finds out who Luffy's father actually is. And I love the different reactions that they have. Like, Buggy, for his part, is just sort of horrified. There's almost a sense with Buggy of like, oh my God, and I have been such an asshole to this guy because I didn't know, and I would like to take some of that back, please. We go over to Boa, and she's just got her little starry eyes and is saying, it wouldn't bother me if your father was the devil himself. You guys, I do not know how I feel about this Boa being in love with Luffy thing. It's so bizarre. I think, and I know I've said this already, but I really think my main issue is just that Luffy seems so childish. So it just feels really creepy. It feels like, to me, even though I know Luffy is meant to be like 17 or 18 years old, he feels to me like he's 14 years old, like at most. And she feels like she's 35, even though I think she's probably not meant to be that old. And so there's just something about how I hesitate to call Luffy simple-minded, because I feel like that implies a different thing than what I mean. But Luffy he has like really childlike qualities and understanding of the world. And so her approaching everything the way that she does, with the assumptions that she's making, it always just feels a little weird. At the same time, it is really funny. And the fact that she is able to make everybody around her fall in love with her. And then the thing, like, it happens the opposite way with Luffy, is a pretty good gag. And I like that this is how we've decided to do this, like how to cope with her ability, because having Luffy fall in love with her just wouldn't feel like it made sense. He's just not that type. Even if it is like a magical spell, he just seems immune in a way to the charms of men or women. He's like, I don't even know if I want to say that he's exactly asexual, but that's as close as I'm getting to what I mean. It's just uncomfortable, you know? And the way that she thinks about, like, because eventually she's got the key for Ace's manacles. And Luffy just wraps himself around her to thank her. And she, of course, goes into this sort of reverie where she's thinking about the way that she, like, she thinks about, oh, the warmth of his touch is still in my breast. No, my entire body. Is this what people call marriage? And then we go into this like dream sequence of her walking to like down the aisle to meet Luffy, who, by the way, is in this like white tux and calls her baby. And it's just so wrong. It's just very wrong. And it's like, I want to just be able to sit back and enjoy the goofiness of this, but also the weight of this is unfair because there are no female fucking characters in this show a lot of the time. That the fact that one of the most powerful women we have met has been laid low because she can't stop imagining marrying a character is deeply frustrating in a whole different way. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, if we didn't just have one woman in any given group, we've got all these giants and there's one woman giant, like the Straw Hat crew, even, we have 2 women out of all of them at this point. It's not like fair to expect certain things when you've got so few characters to spread the traits around. There's just no avoiding sometimes the feel of like, oh God, this is gross. Like Luffy runs into, what's her name? Cage. And half the scenes with her, well, the scene, it's really just one scene where she shows up, but it's all about how the other 2 dudes on her team are like in love with her. And you know what I mean? It just feels like, can we just have like any women who it isn't their sexuality that's like the main point of them being around? The Straw Hats, we mostly don't get that except when it's Sanji. The others leave them alone mostly, and it's not like, you know, a huge thing. But even when we land on other islands and stuff and encounter other people, they do wind up becoming like the object of somebody's speculative eye. And I just wish that we could like get away from this a little bit more, have more women, have it not always be about that, how beautiful they are, how much men want them and how they can use that, or how it renders men useless or whatever. Oh God, David just said 3 Straw Hat women. There's Vivi, remember, with a winky face. You take that back. Ugh. I'm so sorry that I didn't like Vivi, everybody. I'm sure that there are people out there who are just like, I don't understand you, Natasha. Why are you so mean to her? I don't understand it either. She was just very, very dumb. But anyway, so yeah, this whole thing with Boa, like she steps in to save him a couple times because Smoker, for his part, is over here like, I wondered who the fuck it was that stepped in and saved you. And now it makes sense. It was your dad, and he's not fucking here right now. So nobody's going to save you. And as soon as he says nobody's going to save you, I was like, sir, you can't say those words out loud. I love it though, guys. He's holding him in place, saying to Luffy, nobody is going to come save you. And Luffy is just struggling against him and just says, at least in the dub, this sucks. And I don't know why, but I've watched these episodes twice. And both times I just like kind of snort laughed because it just felt like such an inadequate expression. This dude is like gonna kill you in a second. He is here to take your life. And just being like, this sucks is just so understating the situation. It got me. It really made me fucking laugh. Florian says, this is still so funny to me that you don't like her. Love it. I am glad that it's at least amusing. I will just never get over her standing at the bottom of that staircase. I know that's a stupid thing to get fixated on. I'm aware, but it's just one of those things. We all have the things that we are fully aware we are being unreasonable about. And we can't help it. It's just the way we feel about it. And that staircase and her standing at the bottom of it while people are coming at her on fucking horses, I will just never recover from what a stupid move that was. Anyway, so let's talk about this thing with fucking Kuma. Because Kuma is evidently no longer alive. And this was such a surprise, the way that this is presented. It takes a while to kind of like get to the point here because like I said, we jump around a lot and we drag a lot of things out. But eventually Doflamingo is like mocking Eva because Eva sees Kuma and believes like, oh, we were friends, we were cool. And so if I am able to get to him and talk to him, then he's going to lay off because we have history. But Kuma doesn't seem to recognize him and is still attacking him in the normal way. And Doflamingo says like, oh, well, Kuma doesn't exist the way that you remember him anymore. And I kind of had thought that Kuma was still alive as himself, but that they had made clones of him that did different things. And I kind of thought that Doflamingo implying that Kuma is straight up dead was just him fucking with Eva a little bit. But then when we go over to Luffy and he catches up with Eva eventually, he is thinking about how Kuma said to him, we will never meet again. And Luffy thinks to himself, he knew even then. So I had an idea of what this meant, and it seems like I was really not getting it. Apparently, the thought is that Kuma was like being experimented on even as he was at Thriller Bark, and he knew he was close to being killed. Is that what I'm supposed to be getting from this? I don't really understand how he was out in the world, like, able to do his own thing, but also still being experimented on and knowing that his life is going to end. This may be something that I'm not supposed to understand fully at this point. It might just be like, we're getting hints of stuff and then we'll get a full story later. But, I commented at the time how weird it was because it felt like Kuma was actually trying to help Luffy when he's allegedly against them. And then in this episode, Iva says how much Kuma hated the government. And so this gives the impression that whatever was going on with Kuma serving them was either against his will or it was a ploy on his part, but nevertheless, eventually cost him his life. Florian says, yeah, I think you go in the right direction with your thoughts. Okay. So, yeah, it's just a weird situation. And I really I felt for Iva because thinking you see a friend and that you having an expectation of how they're going to act toward you and then they don't is always like a really jarring experience. I've had this in like real life. I've also read a lot of books where there's a thing that's happening with like a character that you met earlier and they behaved one way, and then you run into them again and they are not acting like themselves. And even in a book secondhand, it's like always just sort of like, wait, what the fuck? I liked this guy. Why is he acting like this? David says there's a mystery that takes a bit to unravel. You might want to get a corkboard for Kuma in particular. Ooh, fun. I should fucking get a corkboard to have behind me when I record. But yeah, there's like, what was it? It's Sense and Sensibility. If any of you have like read that Jane Austen or watched any of the movies, there is a point where Willoughby, who is this really likable character that you've grown to enjoy a lot, he just bounces and disappears, and the sisters don't know what happened to him. And then eventually they run into him at a party in London, and he acts like he barely knows them. And that's always one of my favorite scenes because it's so upsetting and it's so public. And they genuinely do not get why he's behaving this way. And they can't exactly call him out, although the sister one does. So this thing with Kuma and like Iva being like, dude, it's me. What the fuck? I felt really bad for Iva. There was just something very pure in the way that Iva was trying to be like, but we're friends though, you know? And eventually Iva gets to this point where he's like, I can't believe you don't remember me. Nobody forgets my face. And that's the way that he like presents the rage that he's feeling. Indignation over, let's see, I'm seeing the part where he's like letting his face get scanned. And he's saying, as if he'd ever sacrifice himself for your stupid plan. Snap out of it. It's me. I love Doflamingo. Can you stop yelling? It's really starting to get on my nerves. Doflamingo I find very annoying, but in a way that is amusing nevertheless, you know? He does this thing here where, you know, Kuma has just said, well, or not Kuma, I'm sorry, Iva, he is talking to him like, how can he be gone? And Doflamingo says he was fine just a few days ago. But it's tragic. Before you know it, someone's gone. And I can't help but laugh a little bit at the fact that, like, every time Doflamingo is poking at people, he can't help but do a sort of, like, existential thing. He just always has to get in a little bit of like, well, that's the tragic comedy of the human condition, isn't it? And he is really, it's like, you could see it as somebody just needling everyone around them. And I certainly think he knows it's irritating, and so that adds to his own amusement. But I think to a point, Doflamingo really is actually sharing his thoughts. I think he is sort of like, yeah, wow, life, right? It just really comes at you fast. And there's a bit about him with this attitude that I can't help but enjoy a little bit. Because I could do this, you know? I'll be in the midst of like some sort of situation, and then I'll step back from it and sort of be like, wow, shit's really fucking crazy, you know? So anyway, he says that Kuma doesn't even realize anymore that he ever used to be human. So, you know, he's just like a monster now. He may as well be dead. And this is when we see Kuma doing his like laser blast thing that sends both Luffy and Iva ducking for cover as he fucking lights up one side of the ocean. It's sort of weird, and this is the danger, you guys. We've seen him do this sort of weird power before, and granted, it was the actual Kuma. It was not this imitation. And his power was supposed to be so impressive. We saw from afar how it's basically like a mushroom cloud, and then the island's fine. We come back and it's like everybody got knocked over, and that's pretty much the extent of it. The building got damaged, you know? But yeah, this is when Iva is just like, nobody fucking forgets my face, and knocks this imitation Kuma on his ass. Iva saying hee-haw just makes me giggle a little bit. Like, I don't really get that, but it still works, you know, as just like a weird catchphrase. And he calls his crew succulent candy boys, which I straight up want to be a band name, please. I just really, you know, here comes Ivanka and the succulent candy boys. He does vengeful kick and sends Kuma careening like basically into a mountain of ice. And one of the people just yells, "Work it, boss." I love that so much. And yeah, this is when Iva says, "I've met a lot of people, but nobody ever forgets my face." And then we jump over to Buggy. Now, I haven't really dealt with Buggy, and I'm like out of time here, so I'm just going to do it really quickly. But suffice to say, he is still like being hyped by his dudes in a way that's like really overestimating what he's capable of. And they expect him to just straight up fight Whitebeard, to which Buggy at least has the wisdom to know, I am out of my depth with that. Oh my God, I can't fight him. But he doesn't want to lose face, so he's just sort of like just buying time. And eventually Whitebeard pretends he needs Buggy's help, and that like Buggy can just go ahead and kick his ass later as long as they can team up right now. And it's such a good bit because Buggy takes it at face value, and Marco is like standing next to Whitebeard after this interaction, and he just says something like, "Well, he is really surprisingly easy to manipulate." And I thought that was so funny. Like, how obvious it is to everybody. Mr. 3 is just watching from the sidelines as everyone keeps hyping Buggy up, being like, how do you guys not see that he's fucking playing you? And it's just funny. It's very funny. I am enjoying the role that Buggy is playing sort of in the background of all of this. And eventually he sees that like Luffy has made a break to go towards Ace and is thinking like, oh, he's just going to steal my thunder. Guys, we got to head out now. And he had been hiding in like a snowbank or something. So they just burst out and they're following Luffy. And fucking Crocodile is still attempting to get at Whitebeard, and all of Whitebeard's guys are just, you've got to go through us. And Whitebeard's starting to get pretty irritated by this because it's just a waste of resources at this point. The fucking Diamond guy turns up and gives him a pretty good deck in the face, and it seems somewhat effective. And Doflamingo turns up, and the two of them apparently have a little bit of a history. But this Diamond guy, I do really enjoy his ability, and it looks cool as hell. But let's see. And yeah, and then we have the very, very last moment where Luffy has almost seemed to reach Ace, but you've got all these clouds of dust ahead of him. So like, you know, he's not reaching Ace. Whatever, there's something in that dust. And it turns out to be Hawkeye. It's Mihawk, and he is standing there, and he says to himself, like, hey, sorry, Shanks, but I'm not going to go easy on him. I wonder if he's going to die today, or maybe not. Who knows? He is very philosophical in his approach. And I genuinely don't know what happens here, because, like, ordinarily, I would think he would crush Luffy. It would be no problem. But I don't think Luffy is being stopped. I think that he gets through somehow, and I don't know if it's an assist from somebody else, if he manages to utilize an ability I haven't seen yet, if Mihawk, like, changes his mind, I don't know. So, anyway, that's where we are. I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate you a lot. Thank you, Florian, for making the spreadsheet as well. And until next time, kids, Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.